Imagine you have a staff member, and that staff member might be you, who's brilliant at their job, creative, dedicated, passionate about the mission. But as brilliant as they are, they cause endless frustration because things don't get finished. They show up late. They're always asking why and seem to need everything explained 3 times. Your HR director suggests a performance improvement plan. You just wish they'd try harder like you know they can. What you don't realize is that your workplace, including your expectations, are designed for neurotypical brains. And this person's brain works differently. Not worse, differently. And until you understand that difference, you'll keep losing brilliant people. That's what we're exploring today. Welcome to Different Minds, Difference Makers. I'm Leah Milner-Campbell, and I believe that purpose-driven organizations are strongest when they embrace different strengths, working towards the same mission. This podcast is about how different minds on your team can become your greatest difference makers. Today, we're starting at the beginning. What does neurodiversity actually mean? If you've heard terms like neurodiverse, neuroinclusion, or neurodivergent, but you're not quite sure what they mean in practice and how they relate to your organization, this episode is for you. We'll cover what these terms actually mean, what neurodivergence looks like in the workplace, and why this matters for organizations like yours who are trying to make a difference in the world. Let's get into it. So what is neurodiversity? Let's start with the term itself. Neurodiversity is the idea that human brains naturally vary, like biodiversity describes the natural variation in our world. There's no single right way for a brain to work. The term neurodiversity emerged in the 1990s in an online forum for autistic people, and it's now used both to describe the natural cognitive variation that occurs in our human population and to describe the social movement, which recognizes that cognitive and neurological difference is a natural human variation rather than disorders or deficits. Think of it like this. If everyone's brain worked the same, we'd all solve problems the same way. We'd all think the same way. We'd all approach challenges in the same way. But then we'd be missing out on innovation. We'd have an echo chamber. Neurodiversity means cognitive diversity, different ways of thinking, of processing, of problem solving. And that difference, that diversity, strengthens organizations. While it's still true that every single brain is unique, like our fingerprints are, we can group those with key similarities in what we call neurotypes. The majority of people in our world have what we call a neurotypical neurotype. And that means that their brains work in the ways that society expects and designs for. Most systems, education, the workplace, even social expectations are built by and for neurotypical brains. Neurodivergent brains work differently than what's considered typical in society by the majority. Like many human traits, human cognition exists on a bell curve. Typical brains are the majority, and neurodivergent brains diverge from that majority. Neurodivergence is an umbrella term that includes a number of more specific neurotypes, and these include ADHD, also known as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, although that name is misleading because it's not a deficit of attention, but a difference in how attention works. Autism, where there are differences in social communication, sensory processing, and information processing. Dyslexia, which is differences in how the brain processes written language. Dyspraxia, differences in motor coordination and planning. Dyscalculia, differences in processing numerical information, tic disorders, and others. Many neurodivergent people have multiple neurotypes, like me. I'm autistic, ADHD, dyscalculic, and dyspraxic. Our best estimates in 2025 suggest at least 20% of the population is neurodivergent. That's 1 in 5 people. So if you have a team of 10, statistically, 2 people in that team will be neurodivergent. However, because of systematic misunderstandings about neurodiversity throughout our society, the majority of neurodivergent adults remain undiagnosed, and many of them are still unaware of their neurodivergence. That was me just 5 years ago. I had absolutely no idea. We've known about neurodivergence for over 100 years, and most of that knowledge and understanding has come through what we now might describe the medical model. Dyspraxia was first identified in the early 1900s, and its official medical name is still developmental coordination disorder. Dyslexia was first called congenital word blindness and was first recognized in 1896. Autism was first described in the medical literature in 1940s, and so on. The medical model says this person has a disorder, a deficit that needs to be fixed or managed or cured. It puts the problem in the person. The neurodiversity movement I spoke about a moment ago is part of what's called the social model. This is a different way to frame neurodiversity, which explains that some people's brains are different to others, not broken or disordered, but different. The social model explains that neurodivergent people experience difficulties in society, including at work, because society, including workplaces, creates barriers that disable them. This places the problem in the systems and the environments that we've built. To put this into a concrete example, let's say a dyslexic person struggles to read lengthy text-heavy documents quickly. The medical model would explain that this person has a reading disorder, and because of that deficit, they might need extra time or special accommodations. The social model recognizes that society uses quite a lot of dense text. But to change that and make things work better for everyone, we could instead make information available in multiple formats, in text, audio, video, visual summaries, so that each person could access it in a way that works for their brain. Do you see the difference? One puts the burden on the individual to adapt to the majority. The other changes the system so it works better for everyone. Neuroinclusion is about the social model. It's about removing barriers so that all minds can thrive. However, it also acknowledges that until the world is truly neuroinclusive, individual barriers still need to be removed. So what does neurodivergence actually look like in your workplace? I want you to think about your team, current or past, as I describe some common patterns. Have you ever worked with someone who is brilliant, genuinely brilliant, at certain aspects of their role, but struggles with things that seem a bit basic to everyone else? Maybe they write incredible reports but can never get them in on time, or they're amazing in a crisis but can't handle routine administrative tasks. Have you ever worked with someone who is articulate and insightful in meetings, but then submit disorganized written work with spelling and grammar errors, or who takes significantly longer than others to read through reports and documents and might miss key details buried in dense text? Have you ever worked with someone who send emails that land badly? They're direct, get straight to the point, and somehow people find them rude or abrupt. But when you raise it with them, they seem genuinely confused about what they did wrong. Have you ever worked with somebody who is consistently late despite being apologetic about it? They arrive flustered, clearly trying to be on time, but it keeps happening no matter how many times you discuss it. Have you ever worked with somebody who avoids tasks involving budgets, data analysis, or working with numbers? They might be excellent at the strategic or creative aspects of their role, but seem to struggle disproportionately when they need to work with numbers in spreadsheets or financial reports. Have you ever worked with someone who needs to understand the why behind everything? They question processes, ask for explanations, and won't just follow the procedure without understanding the reasoning. Have you ever worked with somebody whose performance seemed to drop significantly after an office move, a restructure, or a change in how things are done? Things that seemed like minor adjustments to everyone else threw them completely off. Have you ever worked with someone who seems to avoid team social events, arrives late and leaves early from away days, or declines optional team building activities? Maybe you've even wondered if they're really a team player. Have you ever worked with somebody who seems to take feedback very personally? Even constructive, kindly meant feedback seems to devastate them in a way that feels disproportionate. Have you ever worked with somebody who has piles of papers everywhere, seems chaotic and disorganized, but insists they have a system and get frustrated when someone tidies their desk? Have you ever worked with somebody who seems to need everything in writing, asks for meeting notes to be sent out, requests written confirmation of conversations you've had face to face? If you've nodded along to any of these, here's what you need to know. These examples could all be neurodivergence. The person who's brilliant, who struggles with basic tasks, that could be ADHD, an interest-based attention system that excels at complex, engaging work but struggles with routine tasks. The articulate person whose writing has spelling and grammar errors, that could be dyslexia, a difference in how the brain processes written language, which means reading requires significantly more cognitive effort and concentration, so they fatigue faster and might miss details. The direct emailer who doesn't understand why people are upset, that could be autism. Autistic people are literal, efficient, and miss unwritten social rules about softening messages. The person who's always late, time blindness, a real ADHD trait where the brain struggles to estimate and track time accurately. The one who avoids numbers and data, that could be dyscalculia, where the brain processes numerical information differently, making tasks involving numbers genuinely challenging, regardless of overall intelligence. The one who always needs to know why, this could be the autistic need for logic and understanding before following procedures. The one affected by the office changes, the autistic need for routine and difficulty with unexpected changes. The one who avoids social events, many neurodivergent people experience social exhaustion. Being around people is genuinely draining, and they need quiet time to recover. The one who takes feedback hard, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, common in ADHD, where criticism, real or perceived, feels like a physical wound. The chaotic desk, executive function challenges with organization, which is common for ADHDers, dyspraxic, and autistic people. The one who needs everything in writing could be struggling with auditory processing difficulties, common across neurodivergent neurotypes, where spoken information doesn't stick the way that written information does. I bet you've encountered people like this before and assumed, or seen people around you assume, poor performance, bad attitude, not a team player, unprofessional. What happens to these people is they get put on performance improvement plans. They have difficult conversations with their managers. They find themselves in conflict with coworkers. They find themselves not getting promoted. They get let go because they're just not working out. Now, I'm not saying that every neurodivergent employee is brilliant or that neurodivergent people can't have bad attitudes or poor performance. But I've been in the workplace long enough to know that most people are doing the best they can. And if they're struggling, it's not because they're not trying hard. Workplaces model society. It's not our fault as individuals that society is how it is, but we do have an opportunity as individuals to make an impact and make things better. And isn't that what all of us in purpose-driven careers are trying to do? Our opportunity is to take a step back from blame or judgment and to ask a simple question. Is our workplace designed in a way that creates barriers for some people? It gets in the way of them doing the best they can do. And if the answer is yes, your organization is in trouble. That's because to solve complex problems, you need difference. You need diversity. Charities, social enterprises, research, we're all trying to tackle incredibly difficult problems. And difficult problems need different ways of thinking. If everyone on your team thinks the same way, you'll come up with the same solutions everyone else has already tried. Neurodivergent people often think differently, literally. Pattern recognition, systems thinking, creative problem solving, attention to detail that others might miss, the ability to hyper-focus on a research or a complex task. These are all strengths that are common in neurodivergent brains. So if you are excluding neurodivergent people, intentionally or unintentionally, then you are excluding cognitive diversity, and that weakens your work. Most purpose-driven organizations have values around equity, inclusion, justice, but neurodiversity is often missed because as a society, we don't have a functional understanding of what it even is. We are playing decades of catch-up. So if your organization says we value diversity, but your systems only work for neurotypical brains, there is a gap between your values and your practice. And neurodivergent people notice that gap, especially neurodivergent people who also hold other marginalized identities. You already have neurodivergent people in your organization, I bet you. At least 20% of the population is neurodivergent. That's 1 in 5 people. Some know they're neurodivergent and they're masking, exhausting themselves, trying to appear neurotypical, burning out, not performing to the full extent of their actual capacity. Some don't yet know that they're neurodivergent. They just think they're not good enough. They're not trying hard enough. They're dealing with shame and imposter syndrome and don't even realize that they're masking themselves into exhaustion. And some have left. They couldn't sustain the exhaustion of working in an environment that didn't work for their brain. When you create a neuro-inclusive workplace, you're not just attracting new diverse talent. You're enabling the neurodivergent people who are already in your organization to be able to thrive. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most leaders, managers, and HR professionals have never been trained on neurodiversity. It wasn't in your leadership course. It wasn't in your HR qualification. It might not even be in your EDI training. So you end up making decisions about performance and recruitment and team dynamics and workplace culture without understanding that at least 20% of people experience the workplace completely differently than you do. You're designing onboarding processes, writing job descriptions, setting performance expectations, creating meeting structures, all based on assumptions about how brains work, specifically how neurotypical brains work. And that's not your fault. You can't know what you've never been taught. But now that you are learning this, you have a choice. Keep doing things the same way, or start building understanding into your organization. And that's where expert support can come in. You can't build neuro-inclusive practices if you don't understand neurodiversity. Every organization needs personalized guidance because your team and your culture and your challenges are unique. I worked with one charity CEO. Let's call her Jody. She came to me about a staff member who was underperforming. This person, Nina, was brilliant at analysis, came up with innovative program ideas. She was deeply passionate about the cause the organization worked to support. But she kept missing deadlines. Her reports were disorganized. She seemed to struggle in team meetings. It turns out that Nina had ADHD, but felt too afraid to say anything because when she disclosed in her previous workplace, she was denied reasonable adjustments and set up to fail. Nina was absolutely brilliant, exactly what the organization needed. Her creativity and analytical brain were the reason that she was hired, but she found the administrative tasks that she was also expected to do, reporting, filling in timesheets, organizing and prioritizing her to-do list, extremely difficult. The meetings she struggled in, they were 90 minutes long with no breaks, no agenda, no clear actions documented. The conversation jumped around and everyone was just expected to remember what had been agreed. Nina didn't need a performance management plan. Instead, the solutions that worked were job crafting, moving some of the administrative tasks out of Nina's role to someone else's role who thrives on admin. Better meetings, a new team commitment to have better meetings for everyone with shorter length, a clear agenda, and written minutes, freeing up more of Nina's time to do the analysis and innovation that she excels at. And finally, ADHD coaching for Nina that helped her to find ways to prioritize and organize her work in a way that worked for her brain. The result was that Nina's poor performance became outstanding performance. The organization kept a brilliant staff member, and everyone benefited from having shorter, more focused meetings and a workplace that was more open to flexibility. So if you've listened to this episode and you're recognizing some patterns, maybe you're thinking of some team members in particular, maybe you're thinking about yourself, here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to go into your next team meeting and start labeling people. Don't tell someone, hey, I think you're ADHD, or you're probably doing that because you're autistic. That's not helpful, and that's not your place. Here's what I want you to do, though. Firstly, it's time to challenge your assumptions. Most of us operate on the assumption that everybody basically works the way we do. It's one of the many human biases that we all have. When someone doesn't behave the way we think everyone should, when they need things explained differently, when they respond differently to feedback, when they manage their time differently, we get frustrated. We think, why can't they just, or if only they would? What if you flip that assumption? What if instead of assuming that everyone is like you assumed that everyone who you work with, who you come across, is different? Not better or worse, just different. That simple shift from everyone should work like me to everyone's brain works differently changes everything. It moves you from frustration to curiosity, from why won't they change to what do they need? Second, educate yourself and others. This episode is just the beginning. Understanding neurodiversity isn't something you can get from one podcast episode or one training session alone. It's ongoing learning to unlearn what you thought that you knew. What you can do is start building that understanding systematically in your organization. That means the leadership team learning about neurodiversity and talking about what it means for your workplace. It means HR understanding neurodiversity in recruitment, onboarding, performance management. It means managers recognizing when someone is struggling because of barriers, not poor performance. It means teams understanding different communication styles, different working styles, and different needs. Neuroinclusion requires us to take an active stand against the status quo, to build understanding, and then translate that understanding into how your organization actually works. Third, look at your systems. When you notice someone struggling, yes, think about what that individual person needs, but also ask, what does this tell us about our systems? If multiple people are struggling with the same thing, maybe your meetings, maybe your reporting processes, maybe your communication systems, those aren't a series of individual problems. That's a systems problem. And fixing systems benefits everyone. Shorter, more focused meetings, everyone benefits. Information in multiple formats, everyone can access it better. Clearer communication, everyone wins. Neuroinclusion isn't about making special accommodations for a few people only. It's about building systems that work for a wider range of people to make things better for everyone. I know this can feel overwhelming. Where do we even start is the question I hear most often. Here's where. Start with awareness. Start noticing the patterns that we've talked about today. Start questioning your assumptions about how everyone should work. Start asking, is this a barrier or is this performance before jumping to conclusions? And also be honest with yourself. Does your organization have the knowledge and capacity to do this well internally? Or do you need external support to build this properly? There's no shame in needing support. Neurodiversity is complex. Every organization is different. Getting expert guidance saves you time, prevents mistakes, and means that you can build neuroinclusion properly from the start rather than retrofitting later. So let's recap. Neurodiversity means natural variation in how brains work. Neurodivergent means thinking differently from what's considered typical, including ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and so on. Neuroinclusion means removing barriers so different kinds of minds can thrive. What looks like poor performance might be neurodivergence, meeting neurotypical systems. And purpose-driven organizations need cognitive diversity to solve complex problems. The question isn't, do we have neurodivergent people in our organization? You do. The question is, are you creating the conditions for them to thrive? If you're listening to this and thinking, we really don't know enough about this, you're right. Most organizations don't. That's not a failing, it's just reality. But it's also fixable. I work with purpose-driven organizations to build neuro-inclusive cultures, from leadership awareness training through to practical implementation strategies. Every organization is different, so I work with you to figure out what neuroinclusion looks like for your specific team, culture, and mission. If you're ready to move from awareness to action, book a free consultation at leahmilner-campbell.co.uk. We'll talk about where you are now, where you want to get to, and what support would actually help. Or if you're not quite ready for that but want to learn more, keep listening. I'll be putting out new episodes of this podcast every 2 weeks, full of free information, tips, and resources. I've also got a companion newsletter with even more free stuff, with the link in the show notes. Next episode, we're talking about the business case for neuroinclusion because yes, it's the right thing to do, but it also strengthens your organization, improves retention, and makes you better at delivering your mission. So join me in 2 weeks for that conversation. Thanks for listening to Different Minds, Difference Makers. If you found this useful, please share it with other leaders in your network who are trying to build better, more inclusive organizations. And remember to subscribe so you get notified of new episodes. See you next time.